Our world is woven from four ancient mysteries. Earth, air, fire, and water are not just materials. They are characters in humanity's oldest and strangest stories. For thousands of years, our ancestors looked at a flickering flame or a rolling stone and saw something sacred, a doorway to the divine or a prison for something terrifying. We are about to journey through 30 of these forgotten tales where history blurs into myth and the natural world reveals its supernatural secrets. By the end, you will possess a collection of enigmas that challenge everything we think we know about the past. We will see stones that walked on their own, a gem that carries a centuries-old curse, and a flame that believers say cannot burn skin. What hidden truth do you think connects a whispering desert to a silent, exploding lake? The line between legend and reality is far thinner than it appears. Which of the sacred elements do you believe holds the greatest secret? The first of our 30 mysteries begins with a departure that defied the very nature of reality. In the ancient texts of the Hebrew Bible, the prophet Elijah does not die. As his successor Elisha watches in awe, a whirlwind rips the sky open, and a chariot of fire drawn by horses of fire appears. Elijah is swept upward in this tempest of flame and air, vanishing into the heavens. This is not merely a miracle story, it is a foundational mystery that asks a profound question. What did those ancient witnesses actually see? For millennia, scholars and mystics have argued this was a literal, divine manipulation of the sacred elements. Fire, typically a destructive force, becomes a vehicle. Air, the invisible medium of life, becomes a focused tornado of ascent. This was physics rewritten by a higher power, a moment where the curtain between the natural and the supernatural was torn aside. But the mystery extends beyond the event itself. Where did it happen? The Bible names a general area near the Jordan River, but the exact site became a holy grail for pilgrims and archaeologists. For centuries, seekers have scoured the landscape from the hills of Jericho to the plains beyond the river, searching for some echo of that divine combustion. Could the ground itself remember such a rupture in the natural order? The quest for Elijah's departure point is a search for a doorway, a place where the elements themselves obeyed a different set of rules. It sets the stage for everything that follows, a story where fire does not consume but carries a human soul skyward. What would it mean to stand on that spot today? The fire that carried Elijah upward was a singular, unrepeatable event. But what if a flame could burn forever, not as a miracle in the sky, but as a permanent fixture of the earth? Far to the east, on the arid Absheron Peninsula of what is now Azerbaijan, such a place has existed for longer than recorded history. This is the Hka of Baku, the fire temple where the ground itself breathes fire. Natural gas seeping from the Earth's crust finds a vent to the surface, and upon meeting the air, it ignites. These are not campfires, but persistent, dancing jets of blue and orange flame that emerge directly from stone altars and a central pavilion's chimney. They have burned through empires, witnessed the rise and fall of religions, and never gone out. For Zoroastrians, who revere fire as a sacred symbol of purity and the divine light of wisdom, this was a site of profound pilgrimage. They saw in these unquenchable flames a direct manifestation of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god, a piece of the divine order made visible on earth. Centuries later, Hindu and Sikh traders traveling the Silk Road discovered the same fires. They interpreted them through their own lens, building a temple complex around the flames and dedicating it to Jaiwala Jai, a manifestation of the Hindu goddess of eternal fire. Pilgrims would journey for months, sometimes years, to reach this remote outpost. They believed that prayers offered into these eternal flames had a direct line to the divine, that the sacred element of fire itself acted as a gateway, carrying their words and intentions upward. The legends speak of devotees performing rituals in the scorching heat, sitting in meditation mere feet from the roaring vents. seeking purification or enlightenment in the relentless glow. The fire was both a physical test and a spiritual conduit. This creates a fascinating historical layer cake, one faith's sacred site becoming another's without the flame ever flickering. It suggests that the human recognition of the sacred is sometimes written not in scripture, but in the very geology of our planet. The Hga fires ask us a quiet question. Is a miracle something that defies nature, or is it something found in nature's own enduring, mysterious gifts? Here, the divine was not in the flame's origin, which was perfectly natural, but in its timeless persistence, a beacon that called to the faithful across continents and millennia. Yet the search for a sacred flame is ultimately a quest for transcendence, for something beyond our physical limits. But what if the sacred element offered not an escape from the body, but its perfect restoration? This brings us to our third tale, a legend woven not from fire but from water, and it speaks to perhaps our most universal yearning. In the early 1500s, the Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon was said to have sailed through the Caribbean, not solely for gold or land, but on a royal commission to find a miraculous spring. Its waters, whispered in Taino legends, could reverse the flow of time, restoring youth and vigor to anyone who bathed in or drank from them, the fountain of youth. While historians debate how much Ponce de Leon truly believed this quest, the story itself became immortal. It captured the imagination of Europe and cemented itself as one of history's great adventures. But this was not an isolated fantasy. The idea of life-giving, healing waters is a thread found in sacred texts and myths across the globe. In the New Testament, the Pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem was believed to have curative powers when its waters were stirred by an angel. In Hindu tradition, Amrita is the nectar of immortality, a liquid divinity churned from the cosmic ocean that grants eternal life to the gods. These are not mere coincidences of folklore. They represent a profound and ancient human instinct. Water is the element of life. We are born from it, our bodies are mostly composed of it, and we cannot survive more than a few days without it. So it is only natural that our deepest myths would elevate water from a sustainer of life to a conqueror of death. The legend of the Fountain of Youth is humanity's attempt to master the element that defines our mortality. It is the dream of taking the very substance that flows through our veins and through the rivers of the earth, and imbuing it with the power to halt decay itself. We see in these stories a collective hope that the sacred element of water holds a secret not just for cleansing, but for renewal. The search for such a spring is in its purest form, a search for a place where time, the ultimate river, can be made to flow backward. What does it say about us that we have spent centuries across countless cultures telling versions of the same story about a magical pool or a hidden stream? Perhaps it reveals that our fascination with the sacred elements is, at its heart, a fascination with our own potential and our deepest fear of fading away. The dream of water granting eternal life speaks to a profound human desire to conquer our own nature. But what happens when the sacred element of earth itself seems to defy its own weight and stillness? On one of the most remote islands on the planet, a mystery carved from volcanic rock suggests that the ground we walk on might hold secrets of motion and spirit. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is a speck of land in the vast Pacific Ocean, over 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. Its most famous residents are the moai, those colossal stone heads gazing inland with solemn, enigmatic expressions. For centuries, the prevailing question was how a society with no metal tools or wheels could possibly have quarried, carved, and transported nearly 1,000 of these statues, some weighing over 80 tons, across miles of rugged terrain. The conventional answer involved log rollers, ropes, and immense human labor, a story of engineering and sweat. But the island's own oral tradition, passed down through generations, tells a different story. The elders spoke of the statues walking. According to the legend, the moai did not need crude machinery. they were moved by mana, a sacred spiritual power or essence. A powerful priest or chief would channel this mana, imbuing the stone giant with a kind of life force. The massive figure would then rise and, with a slow, rocking gait, walk itself to its final resting place or ahu on the coast. This was not a metaphor for teamwork. The Rapa Nui people believed the earth itself, in the form of their ancestors captured in stone, could be animated by spiritual energy. The element of earth was not inert, it was a vessel waiting for the right command to stir. For a long time, Western archaeologists dismissed this as pure myth, a fanciful explanation for a forgotten engineering technique. But then, a fascinating experiment challenged that assumption. In 2012, researchers Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo, along with a team that included local Rapa Nui, decided to test the walking hypothesis literally. They created a concrete replica of a moai about 10 feet tall and weighing 5 tons. Instead of laying it down and pulling it, they stood it upright. Teams used 3 sturdy ropes, not to drag but to guide. One set of ropes pulled from the front to tilt the statue forward, while 2 teams on either side used ropes attached to the back to rock it from side to side. With a coordinated rocking motion, the replica moai began to waddle forward, almost like a person shuffling their feet. A small group could move the heavy statue hundreds of feet in just minutes. This experiment did not prove the existence of mana, of course, but it demonstrated that the legend of walking statues could have been based on a very real and remarkably efficient method of transportation. The rhythmic side-to-side rocking would have made the statues appear to walk from a distance, their massive forms swaying against the horizon. The legend preserved the how in the language of the sacred. The mana was the coordinated skill, strength, and knowledge of the people, the spiritual force of a unified community moving their ancestors across the land. This mystery blurs the line between spiritual belief and practical ingenuity. It suggests that our ancestors sometimes encoded their greatest technological secrets inside stories of the supernatural, where the sacred element of earth became an active participant in its own journey. The moai did not walk by magic, but the idea that they could walk was the magic that made moving them possible. From the living stone of Easter Island, we move to a gem born from the earth that carries a darkness all its own. Deep within the mines of Colombia in the 16th century, a monstrous emerald was unearthed. It was not merely large, it was breathtaking, a hexagonal column of pure, deep green crystal weighing over 200 carats. This was the Mogul Emerald, and its story is a tapestry of devotion, power, and a whisper of doom that clings to it across centuries. The stone itself became a sacred object when, on one of its polished facets, a master engraver inscribed elegant lines of Islamic prayer. The text begins, "He who possesses this shall be made happy by God." It is a blessing, a divine promise etched directly into the heart of the earth's treasure. But as the gem passed from hand to hand, a strange inversion occurred. The blessing began to feel like a taunt, and the stone gained a reputation not for bestowing happiness but for sowing catastrophe. The curse of the Mogul Emerald is a story about the earth's hidden power. We think of gems as beautiful, inert prizes, but this legend suggests they can absorb the intentions, the conflicts, and the bloodshed of those who own them. The emerald was mined from the sacred element of earth, formed under immense pressure over eons, and some believe it emerged already imprinted with a volatile energy. Its journey is a shadowy one. It likely adorned the turban or treasury of a powerful Indian emperor, a Mughal ruler whose name is lost to time. From there, it vanished into the chaos of history, only to resurface in mysterious ways. It was reportedly in the collection of the Nizam of Hyderabad, one of the world's wealthiest men, whose dynasty faced its own dramatic downfall. Later, it appeared at a London auction in 2001, where it failed to sell, as if the market itself was wary of its legend. Today, its whereabouts are unknown, perhaps held in a private vault by someone who chooses anonymity over notoriety. the curse is never a simple bolt of lightning. It is the slow unraveling of fortune, the unexpected collapse, the personal tragedy that seems to follow the stone from owner to owner. This raises a haunting question about the sacred elements. Can an object formed within the earth become a vessel for fate? Is the curse a supernatural force, or is it the psychological weight of the stone's own violent and covetous history, a self-fulfilling prophecy of greed and fear? The Mogul emerald sits at the crossroads of geology and ghost story, a literal gem of the earth that reminds us some treasures are far too heavy to hold. A gem's curse is a whisper of misfortune tied to human hands, but what of a force so vast it can shatter entire armies and rewrite a nation's destiny? In the late 13th century, the colossal empire of Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, set its sights on the island chain of Japan. The Mongol Yuan dynasty had conquered China and now demanded Japan's submission. When the Japanese refused, Kublai Khan launched the greatest naval invasions the world had yet seen. In 1274, an armada of perhaps 900 ships carrying tens of thousands of warriors landed in Hakata Bay. The Japanese samurai fought with desperate ferocity, but they were being pushed back by the Mongols' coordinated tactics and superior numbers. Then, as the battle raged, the sky darkened. A monstrous typhoon swept across the sea. The Mongol fleet, anchored in the open bay, was utterly defenseless. Their ships were dashed against the rocks, smashed into splinters by the colossal waves and howling winds. The invasion force was annihilated, drowned or scattered. The Japanese defenders, watching from shore, saw their certain defeat transformed into a miraculous salvation by the fury of the elements. 7 years later, Kublai Khan tried again, assembling an even larger force. A fleet historians estimate may have carried over 100,000 soldiers. This second invasion met a fiercer Japanese defense, but again, a decisive victory seemed beyond reach, and once more, a devastating typhoon roared across the Strait of Tsushima. This second storm was, if anything, more complete in its destruction. The Mongol invasion fleet was completely destroyed, ending forever the Khan's ambition to conquer Japan. To the Japanese, this was not a lucky coincidence of weather. It was a divine intervention. They called these storms kamikaze, which translates to divine wind. This was the sacred element of air made manifest as a national protector. In the Shinto faith, the natural world is alive with spirits known as kami. These kami reside in mountains, rivers, trees, and yes, in the winds and the storms. The twin typhoons were seen as the direct action of these powerful kami, answering the prayers of the nation and the emperor, who was considered a descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu. The event did not just create a legend, it fundamentally cemented a spiritual identity. The kamikaze became proof that Japan was a sacred land, Shinkoku, protected by its own gods. This belief was woven into the national consciousness for centuries, influencing art, literature, and even military strategy in later conflicts. Here, a natural disaster, a terrifying act of the atmosphere, was instantly and permanently interpreted as a sacred narrative. The wind was not random chaos, it was a character with intention, a kami defending its home. This mystery forces us to confront a powerful idea. History is not just what happens, it is the story we tell about why it happened. For Japan, the terrifying, destructive power of the typhoon was transformed into a sacred, life-giving breath that preserved their culture and sovereignty. The divine wind reminds us that the elements do not just shape our landscape, they can, in our understanding of them, shape the very soul of a people. The divine wind was a force of nature seen as a guardian's breath, but could a flame be made to guard itself, burning without fuel for centuries? This leads us to the seventh tale, a mystery that flickers at the edge of alchemy and archaeology. For hundreds of years, from the Middle Ages through the Renaissance, explorers and scholars reported a baffling discovery in ancient, sealed tombs. Upon breaking into chambers untouched for millennia, they would sometimes find lamps still alight, their gentle flames illuminating the darkness of ages. These were the perpetual lamps. The most famous account involves the legendary Hermes Trismegistus, a figure who blended the Egyptian god Thoth with the Greek Hermes and was considered the father of alchemy and mystical wisdom. Writers claim that upon opening his tomb, searchers found not a corpse, but a dazzling, ever-burning lamp placed in the center of the chamber. Other stories surrounded Tullia, the beloved daughter of the Roman orator Cicero, whose tomb was said to hold a lamp that had burned for over 1,500 years. The descriptions are always eerily similar: a soft, unwavering light in a space where no air should feed a fire and no hand could tend to it. So what were these witnesses actually describing? The first possibility is a lost technology. Ancient alchemical texts speak of formulas for inextinguishable oils, perhaps using refined petroleum or rare, self-replenishing chemical compounds. Some speculated about wicks made from asbestos, the strange mineral thread that would not consume itself. Could a civilization with deep knowledge of geology and chemistry have engineered a lamp that functioned like a slow-burning battery, a sealed system that could last for generations? The second, more skeptical view is that these accounts were elaborate hoaxes or misunderstandings. Tomb robbers might have left a lamp burning to test for poisonous air, and later explorers, stumbling upon the still warm vessel, assumed it had been lit for centuries. Or the stories themselves could be symbolic fictions, allegories created by medieval monks and Renaissance humanists. In this reading, the perpetual lamp was never a physical object. It was a metaphor for the eternal flame of knowledge, the undying light of the soul, or the secret wisdom of the ancients that remained bright even when buried by time and ignorance. The tomb was the past, and the lamp was the illuminating truth waiting to be rediscovered. This mystery sits at a perfect crossroads. It asks us to consider whether our ancestors achieved a quiet, brilliant mastery over the sacred element of fire, creating a servant of light that could defy time itself. Or it reveals how powerfully the human mind can transform a simple, flickering flame into a story about all that we hope survives: our intellect, our spirit, our legacy. The search for the perpetual lamp is, in the end, a search for a light that never goes out, whether it shines in a buried chamber or in the stories we tell to push back the darkness. A lamp that burns forever is a marvel of containment, a flame held in stasis. But what if a sacred space required the opposite, a crack in the earth itself, a deliberate opening to let something mysterious flow upward? High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus in ancient Greece, the entire Mediterranean world sought answers at such a place. This was the Oracle of Delphi, where the sacred elements of earth and air combined to create one of history's most influential mysteries. Pilgrims, kings, and generals made arduous journeys to this remote sanctuary, bringing lavish gifts and desperate questions. Would their city survive the coming war? Should they found a new colony across the sea, the fate of nations rested on the cryptic verses that would emerge from a single woman, the Pythia. She was the oracle, a priestess chosen from among the local women. Her ritual was precise and terrifying. After purifying herself in the Castalian spring, she would descend into the inner chamber of the temple, the adytum. There she would seat herself on a tall, three-legged stool placed over a deep fissure in the limestone rock. From this chasm, a strange, sweet-smelling vapor would rise. Ancient sources describe it as a pneuma, a breath or spirit emanating from the earth itself. The Pythia would breathe in these intoxicating fumes, entering a profound trance. In this altered state, possessed by the god Apollo, she would begin to speak. Her words were often wild, guttural, disjointed. Attending priests would then translate her utterances into the elegant, ambiguous hexameter verses that were delivered to the anxious supplicant waiting outside. A prophecy from Delphi was never straightforward. It was a puzzle, a riddle that required interpretation. When King Croesus of Lydia asked if he should attack the Persian Empire, the oracle famously told him that if he did, a great empire would be destroyed. He assumed it meant Persia. The empire that fell was his own. The accuracy of the prophecies is debated, but their power is not. For centuries, Delphi functioned as the spiritual and diplomatic nerve center of the Greek world, its authority rooted in this bizarre and potent ceremony. So what was really happening in that sacred chasm? For a long time, scholars dismissed the vapors as a myth, a theatrical device. Then, in the late 20th century, a multidisciplinary team of archaeologists, geologists, and chemists took a fresh look. Geologist Gell Zeilinger de Bouwer discovered that two major fault lines intersect directly beneath the temple site, a fact that could allow gases from deep within the earth to reach the surface. Historical accounts placed the oracle's chamber in a specific lower part of the ruins. When the team analyzed the spring water and rock there, they found evidence of ethylene, a hydrocarbon gas. Ethylene is sweet-smelling, and at certain concentrations, it is a potent psychoactive agent known to induce a trance-like state, feelings of disembodiment and euphoria. It fits the ancient descriptions perfectly. This suggests a stunning possibility. The priests of Delphi may have discovered, by accident or by ancient observation, a geological phenomenon where the sacred element of earth, through its faults and fractures, released a breath, a pneuma, that altered human consciousness. They then ritualized it, building an entire institution around this fleeting intersection of geology and neurochemistry. The oracle was not a fraud, but a brilliant, if unconscious, harnessing of a natural resource. The fissure was the altar, the vapor was the sacrament, and the pythia was the vessel. The sacred elements were not symbols here, they were active, physical ingredients in a recipe for divine contact. Delphi challenges our categories. Was it a spiritual sanctuary or a sophisticated use of environmental psychology? Perhaps it was both, a place where the line between the mystical and the material simply vanished into the intoxicating air. The oracle's sacred vapor was a breath from the deep earth, a fleeting mystery finally pinned down by science. But some movements of stone leave trails so deliberate, they look like the work of a ghostly hand. In the heart of California's Death Valley, there exists a place of profound silence and strangeness called the Racetrack Playa. It is a perfectly flat, dry lake bed, a vast expanse of sun-baked clay stretching for miles under a relentless sky. Scattered across this barren floor are hundreds of rocks, some weighing as much as 700 pounds, and behind them, etched into the hard mud, are long, meandering trails. Some paths are straight for dozens of feet, others curve in elegant loops or sharp angles, as if the stones had decided to go for a leisurely, if somewhat clumsy, stroll. For over a century, this phenomenon defied all logic. No one had ever seen the rocks move. Visitors would find fresh trails beside stones that sat perfectly still, the evidence of motion everywhere, but the motion itself forever absent. The silence of the place made it even more unnerving. It felt like a prank played by the landscape itself. The theories spun were as wild as the desert winds. Some suggested powerful magnetic forces shifting the stones during storms. Others whispered about supernatural intervention or the playful spirits of the valley. More practical minds guessed that hurricane-force winds might push them, but calculations showed that even the fiercest gusts in the area could not budge a boulder that size across level ground. The mystery was a perfect puzzle, written in the earth by the stones themselves, with no witness to explain the handwriting. Then, in 2013, a team of researchers equipped with time-lapse cameras and a lot of patience finally caught the act. The answer was a delicate, beautiful collaboration between water, ice, and wind. On rare occasions during the coldest winter months, a perfect sequence unfolds. First, a rainstorm sweeps across the playa, leaving a shallow layer of water on the normally dry bed. Then, as temperatures plunge overnight, that thin sheet of water freezes into vast, clear panes of ice only a few millimeters thick. The rocks become partially embedded in this icy sheet, As the morning sun returns, the ice begins to melt and fracture into large floating panels. Now, a moderate desert wind, one far weaker than anyone had imagined necessary, pushes against these large sheets of ice. The ice panels, now acting like giant, invisible sails, grip the rocks and slowly, imperceptibly, shove them across the slick, muddy surface below. A rock might travel hundreds of feet in this way, its path dictated by the whims of the wind and the breaking ice, scribbling a trail into the soft mud beneath the ice. By midday, the ice melts completely, the water evaporates, and the stone comes to rest in a new location, its mysterious journey complete, leaving only the trail as proof it ever moved at all. The sailing stones are not supernatural, but they feel like a secret. They reveal how the sacred elements, even in a place called Death Valley, are in constant, subtle conversation. Water becomes ice, ice catches the wind, and together they move mountains, or at least very heavy rocks, in absolute silence. It is a reminder that some of the world's greatest mysteries are not hidden in tombs or temples, but are performed openly on a grand stage, waiting only for us to be patient enough to watch the entire play. Silent stones sail on ice and wind, a secret choreography of elements. Yet in the heart of Jerusalem, another elemental mystery unfolds with thunderous, fervent expectation. Every year on Orthodox Holy Saturday, a dense crowd packs the ancient Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the site venerated as the tomb of Jesus Christ. The air is thick with incense, prayer, and an almost electric tension. Then a moment of profound stillness descends. The Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Jerusalem, after being searched to show he carries no source of flame, enters the small, marble-clad edicule that houses the tomb. The heavy doors are sealed behind him. He kneels in darkness and prays. Minutes pass, sometimes longer. Then, from within the tomb, a light emerges. The Patriarch exits, holding two lit bundles of candles, proclaiming the miracle has occurred. The holy fire has descended. This is not merely the lighting of a ceremonial candle. For the faithful, this flame is a divine gift, a tangible sign of Christ's resurrection, spontaneously ignited by God's grace within the very place of burial. The fire is then passed person to person, candle to candle, in a breathtakingly swift wave of light that surges through the church and out into the city. But the mystery deepens with extraordinary claims about the fire's nature. Countless pilgrims and clergy over centuries have reported that in the first few minutes after its appearance, the holy fire does not burn. They describe washing their hands and faces in the flame, feeling only a warm, gentle glow, not the searing pain of fire. Beards are said to be passed through the blaze without being singed, and fabrics held in the flame do not catch alight. These testimonies are not ancient folklore. They are repeated by modern eyewitnesses who swear to the experience. For believers, this is the ultimate proof of the miracle, a sacred element temporarily stripped of its destructive power, becoming pure, benevolent light. Skeptics, of course, propose other explanations. They point to the long history of stagecraft in religious ceremonies, suggesting the possibility of hidden chemicals like white phosphorus that can ignite spontaneously or create a cool flame. Others argue the non-burning effect is a psychological phenomenon, a combination of extreme excitement, brief exposure, and the human mind's powerful capacity for belief overriding normal sensory signals. The ceremony itself is tightly controlled by the ancient church authorities, and no independent scientific analysis has ever been permitted during the central moment in the tomb. This places the holy fire at the very epicenter of the faith versus skepticism debate. It is a mystery that lives entirely in the realm of subjective experience and unwavering tradition. To witness the event is to be immersed in a raw, collective energy where the line between the psychological and the miraculous dissolves. The fire becomes a living story, passed not just from candle to candle, but from generation to generation, a flame that warms the spirit long before it ever touches the skin. It asks us a difficult, beautiful question. Can a phenomenon be truly miraculous for those who experience it as such, regardless of its physical explanation. In that darkened church, for those waiting with held breath, the sacred element of fire becomes a language, a direct and dazzling conversation between the earthly and the divine. The holy fire transforms a destructive element into a gentle light for the faithful. But what if the sacred element of earth itself could produce music, a deep, resonant song rising from the most silent and desolate places? Across the great deserts of our world, from the vast Sahara to the towering dunes of the Gobi, an ancient symphony plays. These are the singing sands. When the slope of a particular dune is disturbed, either by the wind or by a traveler sliding down its face, the sand does not just shift, it sings. The sound is not a whisper, but a profound, low-frequency hum, sometimes vibrating at a resonant note that can be felt in the chest as much as heard by the ears. It can last for several minutes, a sustained musical tone emanating from billions of tiny grains. To ancient Bedouin tribes navigating the endless sea of sand, this phenomenon was not a curiosity of physics. It was the voice of the desert itself. They called the dunes jinn-infested, believing the sounds were the moans of trapped desert spirits or the haunting choirs of long-buried phantom cities. For Silk Road caravans, the booming dunes were both a navigational landmark and a source of deep superstition. A singing dune was a place of power, a warning to tread carefully, or perhaps an invitation to listen to the secrets of the deep earth. The legends spoke of these locations as portals or as the literal tombs of giants, their slumbering breaths causing the ground to resonate. The mystery was so persistent because the experience is genuinely uncanny. In the overwhelming silence of a desert, to hear a low C or D note humming from the ground beneath your feet feels like a direct communication from the planet. It challenges our assumption that Earth is a silent, solid mass. Modern acoustic science has, of course, deciphered the score to this desert song. The phenomenon requires sand grains of a very specific size, shape, and moisture content. They must be well-rounded and similarly sized, often quartz sand polished by eons of wind. When the dune slope collapses in a small avalanche, these uniform grains slide in synchronized layers over one another. This creates a cascade of millions of tiny collisions, all happening at a remarkably consistent frequency. The entire sand mass acts like the surface of a gigantic, slow-motion speaker, vibrating the air to produce that singular, booming note. The dune itself is the instrument, and the sliding sand is the bow drawn across its strings. This scientific explanation, however, does not diminish the magic, it simply translates it. It reveals that the sacred element of Earth is not inert. It is dynamic, capable of storing and releasing energy as sound under the perfect natural conditions. The singing sands are a perfect reminder that our ancestors were not wrong to hear spirit in the phenomenon. They were simply using a different language to describe a profound truth about the world. They felt the aliveness of the landscape and gave that feeling a name, a story, a jinn. Science gave it a frequency and a grain size. Both are attempts to understand why the earth, in certain sacred places, chooses to sing to us. The desert song is a dry music born from friction and air. Yet at the very bottom of our world, in a landscape defined by absolute cold and silence, water performs a different kind of symphony, one written in a shocking, vital crimson. In the pristine white expanse of East Antarctica's McMurdo Dry Valleys, the Taylor Glacier bleeds. From a jagged fissure in its icy face, a waterfall pours forth, not clear, but a startling, opaque red, staining the snow below in a vivid trail. This is Blood Falls. When explorers first stumbled upon this site in the early 1900s, their minds leapt to the macabre. Was it the blood of some colossal, frozen creature? A bizarre mineral stain, the name they gave it captured that initial jolt of horror and wonder. For decades, it remained a geological curiosity, a strange splash of color on an otherwise monochrome map. The truth, when scientists finally unraveled it, was far more extraordinary than any simple mineral deposit. The source of blood falls is not on the glacier but beneath it. Deep under thousands of feet of ancient ice lies a subglacial lake, sealed away from the atmosphere and sunlight for over 1 million years. This is not a pool of fresh water. It is a body of hypersaline brine, so salty it remains liquid at temperatures far below normal freezing, and it is incredibly rich in iron leached from the bedrock over countless centuries. This trapped ancient brine is under immense pressure from the weight of the glacier above. Occasionally, like a pressure valve being released, it forces its way up through fissures in the ice. As this iron-rich water finally meets the air for the first time in epochs, the iron oxidizes instantly. It rusts. That brilliant, terrifying red is nothing more than the same chemical process that turns an old nail brown, happening on a monumental glacial scale. The waterfall is the glacier exhaling a breath it has held for 1 million years, a breath that rusts upon contact with our world. But the story does not end with chemistry. When researchers sampled this bizarre outflow, they made a discovery that reset our understanding of where life can exist. Within that dark, cold, salty, iron-heavy water, they found life. Not just simple microbes, but a whole community of them, thriving in an environment we would consider utterly inhospitable. These organisms do not need sunlight or oxygen. They are chemolithiotrophs, a mouthful that means they get their energy by processing the iron and sulfur compounds in the water itself. They are living fossils, descendants of microbes that were trapped when the glacier sealed over the lake, evolving in complete isolation in a world of cold, salt, and metal. Blood Falls, then, is not a morbid stain. It is a window. It is a testament to the relentless, stubborn creativity of life, and a profound mystery about the sacred element of water. This water is ancient, a time capsule from a different age of Earth. It carries within it the memory of a lost world and the blueprint for survival in extreme darkness. The falls remind us that water is never just H2O. It is a solvent, an archive, a transporter of minerals and time and life itself. That shocking red cascade is proof that even in the most sterile-appearing places, the elements are engaged in a slow, patient, and vividly colorful drama of chemistry and survival. That red Antarctic waterfall reveals life's persistence in darkness, but another cascade proves elements can create beauty in perfect, paradoxical harmony. In western New York State, tucked within Chestnut Ridge Park, a small waterfall performs a quiet miracle every day. This is the Eternal Flame Falls. A modest stream tumbles over a shale cliff into a grotto below, but behind the shimmering curtain of water, a small, flickering yellow flame burns steadily from a crevice in the rock. It is not a campfire left by hikers. This flame is fed by natural gas seeping from deep within the bedrock, a geological pilot light that has likely been burning for centuries, if not millennia. The visual effect is mesmerizing, a dance of opposites. Water, the element of flow and coolness, cascades freely. Fire, the element of heat and consumption, burns securely behind it, protected from wind and rain by the very water that should, in theory, extinguish it. They exist in a delicate, eternal truce. The geology tells a story of ancient, decaying organic matter. Millions of years ago, this region was a vast, swampy sea. As layers of plants and marine life died, they were buried under sediment and slowly cooked by the Earth's heat. This process, over eons, transformed that ancient biomass into pockets of natural gas, primarily methane. The unique, fractured shale bedrock of the area acts like a network of tiny pipes, allowing traces of this gas to migrate upward along faults and seep out at the surface. When the gas finds an ignition source, perhaps a lightning strike or a long-ago forest fire, it catches, and as long as the seep continues, the flame can burn indefinitely. But long before geologists understood hydrocarbon seeps, people would have encountered this wonder. While specific, recorded legends from the local Native American tribes are scarce, we can imagine with near certainty what such a place would have meant. For the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois Confederacy, whose territory included this land, the natural world was saturated with spiritual power. A site where fire and water coexisted so peacefully would have been seen as profoundly sacred, a place where the elemental spirits communicated or revealed a deep truth about balance. It might have been a location for vision quests, a place to seek guidance, or simply a revered landmark that confirmed the interconnected magic of the world. The flame behind the waterfall represents more than a geological quirk. It is a symbol of unity. In many cultural traditions, fire and water are primordial opposites, locked in a cycle of creation and destruction. Here, they are not at war. They are partners in a serene, continuous performance. The water shelters the flame, and the flame, in turn, illuminates the falling water from within, creating a halo of light in the damp, shaded grotto. It is a living demonstration that the sacred elements are not always in conflict, that they can also create stability and breathtaking beauty in their alliance. This small, enduring flame asks us to reconsider our assumptions about nature's boundaries. What other impossible partnerships are quietly thriving, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to notice the delicate balance they have always maintained? A flame sheltered by water speaks of elemental harmony, but what happens when the sacred element of earth refuses to keep a peaceful tomb? On the sun-drenched island of Barbados in the early 1800s, a sealed family crypt became the stage for a mystery that defied every law of gravity and reason. The Chase Vault, a solid stone structure built into the ground of the Christ Church Parish Cemetery, was the resting place for a prominent plantation family. Its heavy entrance was sealed not with a simple lock, but with a massive marble slab, requiring several strong men to move it. Inside, the vault was meant to be a place of eternal stillness. Instead, it became a chamber of profound disturbance. The first burial was that of Mrs. Thomasina Goddard in 1807. Her wooden coffin was placed in the corner, undisturbed. The trouble began with the next interment. In 1812, the body of young Mary Ann Chase was placed in a heavy lead coffin, which was then set neatly beside the first. When the vault was reopened just a few weeks later to bury Mary Ann's father, Thomas Chase, the scene inside was chaos. Mary Ann's lead coffin, weighing well over 200 pounds, was no longer in its place. It lay overturned in the center of the vault. Mrs. Goddard's lighter wooden coffin, however, remained perfectly undisturbed in its corner. The family, shaken, righted the heavy lead coffin and sealed the vault again, this time with extra care. But this was only the beginning. Over the next several years, every single time the vault was opened for a new burial, the same bizarre scene greeted the mourners. The heavy lead coffins of the Chase family were always found in disarray, tossed about as if by some tremendous, unseen force. They were piled in corners, stacked atop one another, or stood on end. Only the original wooden coffin of Mrs. Goddard ever stayed perfectly, eerily in its place. The island's governor, Lord Commermere, finally ordered a full investigation. In 1819, after a final burial, he personally supervised the sealing of the vault. Sand was sprinkled across the entire floor to capture any footprints. The massive marble slab was cemented into place, and the governor impressed his personal seal into the wet mortar. For months, the vault remained under watch. When it was finally reopened in 1820, the seals were intact. No one could have entered, yet inside, the scene was one of utter pandemonium. The lead coffins were hurled about in wild confusion. The sand on the floor, however, was completely smooth, bearing no marks of human or animal intruders. It was as if the coffins had simply flown through the air of their own accord. The earth itself, the very material of the tomb, seemed to have rejected its contents. Theories erupted, but none fit perfectly. Could flooding be the cause? The vault was on a hill, and engineers found no evidence of water intrusion. The sand floor would have been disturbed by rushing water, and the light wooden coffin would have floated, yet it alone was never moved. What of seismic activity? Barbados does experience minor tremors, but an earthquake powerful enough to hurl 200-pound lead coffins would have been felt across the entire island and would surely have toppled the one wooden coffin as well. It never did. This left the door open for more unsettling interpretations. Was the Earth itself restless? Some whispered of a geological phenomenon, a strange magnetic or gravitational anomaly specific to that patch of ground that acted only on lead. Others spoke of the displaced spirits of the deceased, particularly Thomas Chase, who was by all accounts a cruel and hated man. Could his tormented spirit, or the spirits of those he wronged, be responsible for the violent upheaval? The mystery was so profound and so well witnessed by reputable officials that the family finally gave up. They had the coffins removed and buried separately in the common ground. The Chase vault has stood empty ever since. This tale ties the element of earth to a dual role, as both a final resting place and a seemingly active, disruptive agent. The vault was not merely a container, it became an engine of chaos. It forces us to ask whether some places in the earth are simply not meant for silence, or if the materials we place within them, like heavy lead, can sometimes interact with the ground in ways we do not yet understand. In the end, the only certainty was that the sacred element of earth in that specific spot refused to be a passive grave. A tomb that refused to keep its dead is a chilling thought, a rebellion of the earth itself. But what of lights that appear where no living soul should be, dancing over stagnant waters and lonely moors? Across the world, in the damp places where the land blurs into water, people have reported a haunting spectacle for centuries. A single flickering orb of light, sometimes blue, sometimes a pale yellow, moves with a strange, intelligent motion just above the ground. It hovers, darts, and seems to retreat when approached, luring the unwary traveler deeper into the treacherous marsh or forest. In England, they are called will-o'-the-wisps, the lantern of a mischievous sprite named Will leading people astray. In Scotland, they are fairy lights, the lanterns of the Dina Sith guiding their processions. The French speak of the feu follet, the mad fire, and in Japan, the hitodama are floating balls of fire said to be the souls of the newly dead. These are not mere campfires in the distance. Their behavior is what makes them legendary. They do not stay still. They bob and weave, they disappear and reappear farther away. They seem to watch and react. The folklore is universal and grim. These lights are almost always tied to lost spirits, often those who cannot find peace or who died tragically in the bogs and fens. They are the lanterns of the dead, still searching for the road home, or worse, malevolent fairies and goblins deliberately trying to drown the curious. For the traveler alone on a dark path, seeing such a light could mean the difference between a safe road and a fatal misstep into a water-filled ditch. The phenomenon binds the sacred elements of fire and air into a single, eerie mystery, a cold flame that moves with the wind but is not of it. So what is dancing in those dark places? For a long time, science had no good answer, only a compelling hypothesis. In the oxygen-starved environment of a peat bog or marsh, organic matter decays and produces gases, primarily methane and phosphine. Under the right conditions, these gases can ignite spontaneously upon contact with the air. The combustion would be brief, a quick, cool flame that could appear to float. This theory of marsh gas, or ignes fatuus, the foolish fire, seemed to explain the source of the light, but it struggled to explain the reports of sustained movement, of lights that seemed to dart and lead. How could a bubble of burning gas exhibit such purposeful behavior? The answer may lie in the complex, invisible landscape of the marsh itself. Imagine a vast, uneven field of methane seeping from the mud in tiny, constant streams. As the gas rises, it encounters pockets of different air pressure, gentle breezes at ground level, and thermal currents from cooler water and warmer earth. A single, burning pocket of gas might be carried erratically on these microcurrents, appearing to dart and dance. To a frightened, suggestible observer in the dark, this random motion could easily be interpreted as intelligence, as a lure. The light is real, the gas is real, but the narrative, the spirit or the fairy, is the story we drape over the unknown to make sense of its strange behavior. The ghost light becomes a perfect collaboration between geology and psychology. The earth exhales a flammable breath, the air carries and ignites it, and the human mind, steeped in stories of the unseen world, completes the phenomenon by giving it a name, a face, and a haunting intention. These lights are not supernatural, but they are a natural magic, a demonstration of how the mundane processes of decay and chemistry can create moments of pure, eerie wonder that feel like a message from another world. The ghost lights are a whisper of the earth's hidden breath, a fleeting fire in the damp air. But sometimes the sacred element of earth does not whisper, it roars from the depths. For centuries, the people living around the small village of Moodus, Connecticut, have listened to a disturbing symphony. The sounds are sudden, unpredictable, and deeply unsettling. They are not the rumble of distant thunder, but sharp, explosive booms that seem to erupt directly from the ground, sometimes accompanied by a perceptible shudder in the floorboards. The indigenous Wangan people, who lived in this area long before European settlers arrived, had a powerful explanation for these disturbances. They called the place Mashimudus, which translates to place of noises. Their legends spoke of a powerful and angry spirit, a god named Hobomoko, who was trapped deep within the local hills. The booms and tremors were his furious groans, his struggles against his rocky prison as he tried to break free. To the Wangunk, this was not a geological oddity. It was a sacred and fearsome sight, a place where the earth itself was alive with a divine, if dangerous, presence. When European colonists arrived in the 17th century, they inherited both the noises and the fear. Puritan ministers wrote of the Moodus noises with a mix of scientific curiosity and religious dread, some interpreting them as the very groans of Satan himself, trapped under the New World. The sounds became a local fixture of folklore, a mystery that every generation experienced firsthand. The booms could shake houses, rattle dishes, and were loud enough to wake entire families in the dead of night, leaving them to wonder what colossal force was stirring beneath their feet. Modern geology has listened to the groans of Moodus and deciphered their source, though the explanation loses none of the drama. This region of Connecticut sits atop a unique and ancient geological puzzle. Beneath the surface lies a complex network of deep, brittle faults, remnants of tectonic collisions that happened hundreds of millions of years ago when the Appalachian Mountains were formed. While this area is no longer an active plate boundary like California, the ancient rock is still under immense residual stress. That stress needs to release, and it does so in a very specific way. Instead of a single, massive earthquake, the Moodus area experiences what seismologists call swarms of micro-earthquakes. These are tiny tremors, often too small to be felt as distinct shaking, but they occur in incredibly dense clusters. Sometimes thousands of these microquakes can happen in a short period. The explosive booming sound is a product of this specific geology. The seismic waves from these shallow, clustered microquakes travel through a particular type of rock that acts like a giant amplifier, converting the subtle wave energy into sharp, booming sound waves that punch directly into the air. It is the Earth's crust creaking and cracking like old timber under strain, and the local landscape acts as a natural loudspeaker, broadcasting each tiny fracture as a cannon shot. So the Wangunk people were not wrong. They sensed a powerful force struggling within the earth. They personified it as Hobomoko. Science identifies it as accumulated tectonic stress. Both understandings recognize a fundamental truth that the ground beneath us is not a silent, solid slab. It is a dynamic, groaning entity, a living record of unimaginable pressures and ancient violence. The Moodus noises remind us that the sacred element of Earth has a voice, and sometimes, in certain sacred places, it chooses to use it. The Earth's voice booms in protest, a demand for release. But for countless human societies, the most urgent conversation with the elements has always been a plea, not to the ground but to the empty sky. When the rains refuse to fall and the land cracks with thirst, cultures across the globe have turned to ritual, attempting to summon the sacred elements of water and air through ceremony, dance, and prayer. These are the rainmakers, and their practices form a profound chapter in our relationship with the atmosphere. Among the Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest, the rain dance is not a performance, it is a solemn communal prayer. Dancers move in precise, rhythmic patterns, their steps mimicking the falling of rain, their regalia adorned with symbols of clouds, lightning, and fertility. The shaking of rattles replicates the sound of thunder, and the chants are direct appeals to the Kachinas, the spirit beings who bridge the human world and the divine, believed to bring the life-giving storms from the sacred mountains. Every movement, every song is a deliberate act of sympathetic magic, a way of showing the spirits what is needed by enacting it here on Earth. Far across the Pacific in China, the relationship between drought and ritual took a different but equally powerful form. For millennia, Chinese emperors and local magistrates would perform elaborate ceremonies during times of prolonged drought. They would lead processions to temples dedicated to the dragon kings, the powerful deities who controlled rivers, lakes, and rain. Offerings of food, incense, and music were made. In some rituals, they would even parade a dragon statue through dusty streets, symbolically stirring the celestial dragon from its slumber to bring the rains. The dragon was not merely a mythical beast, it was the living embodiment of the water cycle itself, a sacred creature whose movement through the heavens directly caused precipitation. These rituals, from the deserts of Arizona to the plains of Henan, share a core understanding. They view the weather not as a random mechanical process, but as a responsive, almost conversational relationship between humanity and the elemental forces. The rainmaker acts as an intermediary, using ritual language, be it dance, music, or symbolic action, to restore a balance that has been lost, to remind the sky of its duty to the earth. This was sacred meteorology, a deep science of observance and plea. What is truly fascinating is how the 20th century produced a scientific echo of these ancient desires. The modern practice of cloud seeding does not pray to dragon kings, but it operates on a similar principle of intervention. Scientists discovered that introducing certain substances, like silver iodide or dry ice, into suitably moist clouds could provide a nucleus around which water vapor would condense and fall as rain or snow. The aircraft flying into the clouds, releasing its chemical agents, is in a direct lineage with the shaman shaking a gourd toward the heavens. Both acts are based on observation. The ancient rainmaker observed that certain cloud formations preceded rain, and that certain actions seemed to correlate with a storm's arrival. The modern meteorologist observes the physics of nucleation. One interprets the process through a lens of spirit and symbiosis, the other through a lens of chemistry and physics. Yet the goal is identical: to coax water from an unwilling sky. This parallel invites a humbling thought. Our ancestors were not ignorant. They were expert readers of environmental signs, and they developed a technology of ritual to address the crisis they saw. Cloud seeding is that same human impulse refined by the scientific method. It reminds us that the sacred connection to the elements often begins not in worship, but in a desperate, brilliant need to survive and to speak to the storm in a language it might understand. The earth can speak in groans and whispers, but it can also exhale a silent, invisible poison. In the lush, green highlands of Cameroon in West Africa, two beautiful crater lakes hold a deadly secret deep within their tranquil waters. Lake Monowan and Lake Nyos are not ordinary lakes. They sit atop a volcanic rift where magma simmers close to the Earth's crust, constantly feeding carbon dioxide gas into the groundwater that seeps into their depths. For centuries, this gas dissolved under the immense pressure at the bottom of these deep lakes, building up like carbonation in a sealed bottle. Then, in the 1980s, the caps came off. At Lake Manawan in 1984 and at Lake Nyos 2 years later in 1986, a catastrophic limnic eruption occurred. A landslide, a small earthquake, or a shift in water temperature likely triggered the disaster. The deep, gas-saturated water suddenly lost its pressure, like shaking a soda bottle and popping the top. Enormous quantities of dissolved carbon dioxide explosively bubbled out of solution. This created a massive, invisible cloud of dense gas that rolled silently down the surrounding valleys, displacing the breathable air. Carbon dioxide is not toxic, but in high concentrations it simply suffocates. Victims in the villages near Lake Nyos went to sleep and never woke up. Over 1,700 people and thousands of animals perished overnight, with no visible marks of violence, as if a ghost had passed through and stolen every breath. Survivors who awoke found a world of silence, surrounded by the bodies of their families and livestock. The scale of the tragedy was biblical, a silent killer that left no trace but death. In the aftermath, with no scientific explanation yet available, local legends erupted to make sense of the horror. Some spoke of a spirit or a demon that had risen from the lake in the night. Others, drawing on older beliefs, whispered that the lake itself was angry, perhaps disturbed by some moral transgression of the people. The sheer invisibility of the threat made it feel supernatural, a curse from the earth itself. Science, however, soon identified the culprit, a terrifyingly natural process. These lakes were not cursed, but they were fundamentally unstable, time bombs created by the intersection of geology and hydrology. The sacred element of water, usually a source of life, had become a lethal reservoir for the Earth's subterranean breath. This understanding led to one of the most dramatic and ongoing feats of geological engineering in history. To prevent another disaster, scientists devised a system of degassing. They installed long, vertical pipes that reached down to the gas-rich water at the bottom of the lakes. By pumping a small amount of water from the bottom up through the pipe, they create a self-sustaining fountain. As the water rises, pressure decreases, and the carbon dioxide comes out of solution, forming bubbles. This bubbling column of water acts like a pump, continuously drawing more gas-laden water from the depths and safely venting the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere in a harmless, visible plume. Today, these degassing pipes stand like strange, industrial exhalation devices in the middle of the pristine lakes, a constant reminder of the danger below and a testament to human ingenuity in the face of a silent, elemental threat. The lakes of Cameroon are a sobering lesson. They show that the sacred elements are not always benevolent, and that the line between a life-giving resource and an instrument of death can be as thin as the surface tension on a deadly, still lake. A silent, suffocating lake reveals the Earth's deadly potential. Yet on the opposite side of the world, another body of water performs a spectacle that feels like pure celebration. Every year at the end of the Buddhist Lent, the dark waters of the Mekong River in northeastern Thailand come alive with mystery. As dusk settles, crowds gather along the banks, their eyes fixed on the slow, wide river. Then, without warning, it begins. Glowing red orbs, sometimes just a few, sometimes hundreds, rise silently from the depths of the water. They ascend steadily into the night sky, glowing like miniature suns before fading away without a sound. These are the Naga fireballs, and to witness them is to watch a legend made manifest. For the local people, this is not a geological puzzle to be solved. It is an annual greeting from the Naga, a great mythical serpent believed to dwell in the murky depths of the Mekong. The fireballs are the breath of the serpent, a benevolent offering sent to honor the Lord Buddha as he returns to Earth at the end of the rainy season retreat. The folklore is rich and deeply woven into the culture. The Naga is both a protector of the river and a powerful spiritual entity, and this display is a sacred covenant between the mythical world and the human one. The atmosphere on the riverbank is one of festival and reverence, a communal experience that reaffirms a timeless story. But for the curious observer, the fireballs present a tantalizing scientific riddle. What could cause such a consistent, localized, and visually stunning phenomenon? The most common natural explanation points once more to marsh gases, similar to the will-o'-the-wisps. The Mekong's riverbed is rich in decaying organic sediment, which can produce pockets of flammable gases like methane and phosphine. Under the right temperature and pressure conditions, these gases could theoretically ignite as they bubble to the surface, creating a brief glowing ball of flame. The timing, linked to the end of the rainy season, could coincide with a shift in water temperature or pressure that triggers a large-scale release. Yet this theory faces challenges. The fireballs are described as perfectly spherical, rising quite high, and are a consistent, vivid red. Simple methane bubbles burning at the surface tend to produce a fleeting, flickering yellow flame, not a sustained red orb that climbs with such purpose. This discrepancy has fueled other, more human-centered theories. Some skeptics have suggested the fireballs are the result of distant tracer fire from military exercises across the river in Laos, their trajectories warped by distance and imagination. Others propose an elaborate, generations-long hoax perpetrated by locals using flares or fireworks launched from the riverbed or the opposite shore, all to promote tourism and sustain a beloved myth. Investigations have been inconclusive, with scientists unable to reliably capture or reproduce the exact phenomenon under scrutiny. This leaves us in a fascinating space between faith and physics. The Naga fireballs may be the most potent example yet of a phenomenon that exists in two parallel realities. In one, they are a spiritual event, a sacred interaction with the elemental serpent of the water. In the other, they are an unexplained but natural combustion event, perhaps involving a unique and unstable gas mixture we have yet to fully understand. The truth might lie in a blend of both, a rare natural occurrence that was long ago recognized, named, and ritualized by the people who live beside the river. The fireballs are a conversation between fire and water, a brilliant display that asks us whether some mysteries are more valuable for their meaning than for their mechanism. A serpent's fiery breath rising from a river is a spectacle that defies simple explanation. But what if a mystery arrived not as a fleeting light, but as a physical book, its pages filled with a language no one can read and illustrations of a world that never existed? Locked away in the vaults of Yale University's Banach Library is perhaps the most stubbornly enigmatic object ever created, the Voynich manuscript. Dating to the early 15th century, this 240-page vellum codex is written entirely in an unknown script, an alphabet of elegant, looping characters that has resisted over a century of intense cryptanalysis by the world's best codebreakers, including teams from both world wars. Its text flows in a confident hand, suggesting a real language with consistent patterns, yet it remains utterly impenetrable. But the true heart of its mystery lies in the illustrations. The manuscript is lavishly decorated with bizarre, vibrant paintings, and a significant portion of these depict plants. These are not the careful, identifiable herbals of a medieval monk. They are botanical nightmares, impossible hybrids. You will see a root system that belongs to one species grafted onto the leaves of another, topped with a flower from a third. Stems twist in unnatural spirals, leaves grow in contradictory patterns, and blossoms bloom with a surreal, almost psychedelic complexity. These plants do not grow in any forest or field on Earth. For researchers who believe the manuscript contains real knowledge, this bizarre botany points towards something far more esoteric than simple gardening. Could these illustrations be coded representations of sacred herbalism or alchemical processes? In the medieval worldview, plants were not just medicines, they were direct manifestations of the sacred element of Earth, each holding specific planetary influences and elemental virtues. An alchemist or herbalist might use symbolic composite drawings to hide a process from the uninitiated. A root shaped like a serpent might represent a specific mineral. A blue flower might symbolize a phase of distillation, and the entire impossible plant could be a recipe for a tincture or an alchemical formula. The manuscript's other sections fuel this theory, showing intricate astrological charts, networks of pipes and vessels resembling biological or chemical systems, and even what appear to be recipes. It becomes a tantalizing possibility that the Voynich manuscript is a secret manual, a grimoire of elemental magic where the knowledge of Earth's botanical powers is deliberately obscured in a beautiful, unreadable cipher. Is it a hoax, an elaborate nonsense book created to defraud a wealthy patron? Or is it the sole surviving key to a lost tradition of elemental science, where the lines between botany, chemistry, and spirituality were so blurred they required a secret language to describe? The plants on its pages, forever silent, seem to grow from a soil of pure mystery. The Voynich manuscript's silent garden of impossible plants suggests a hidden language of the earth. But across the English Channel, in the misty fields of Brittany, the sacred element of earth speaks in a language of pure, monumental geometry. Here, near the village of Carnac, the landscape itself becomes a colossal riddle. Stretching for miles across the heather and pine are thousands of prehistoric standing stones arranged in staggering, precise rows. There are over 3,000 of these weathered megaliths, some towering over 13 feet high, lined up like a ghostly army frozen in mid-March. This is the largest collection of standing stones on Earth, and their purpose has been lost for over 5,000 years. To walk among these silent sentinels is to feel the weight of an immense, forgotten intention. The stones are not random. They are organized into distinct alignments with long, parallel rows that run for hundreds of meters, curving slightly or breaking into patterns that seem to mirror celestial movements. Who could have commanded such a workforce, and for what possible reason? The local folklore, born from a need to explain the inexplicable, offers a dramatic answer. The legend says these are not stones at all, but the remains of a Roman legion. The story tells of the sorcerer Merlin, who, to protect the people of Brittany from the advancing Roman army, turned the entire legion to stone with a single, powerful spell. The soldiers, caught mid-stride, were petrified forever, their helmets and armor slowly eroding into the granite shapes we see today. It is a tale that transforms a geological mystery into a narrative of magic and defense, where the earth itself became a weapon against invasion. Yet modern seekers have proposed theories that are, in their own way, just as mystical. In the 20th century, the idea of ley lines gained traction, popularized by amateur archaeologists who noticed that many ancient sacred sites seemed to fall in straight lines across the countryside. Carnac, with its vast linear alignments, became a central piece of this puzzle. Proponents suggest the stones were not placed randomly, but were deliberately positioned along powerful, invisible currents of Earth energy, a kind of spiritual electricity flowing through the planet's crust. These ley lines, they argue, were known to our ancestors who built their monuments as nodes or amplifiers on this global grid. The standing stones would act like acupuncture needles for the Earth, tapping into these energies for purposes of healing, fertility, or communication. While mainstream archaeology finds little evidence for measurable energy lines, the theory persists because it addresses a deep human intuition. When you stand in the middle of those rows, the alignment feels too deliberate, too vast to be merely decorative. It feels functional. It feels like a machine built from the sacred element of Earth, designed to interact with a force we can no longer perceive. Whether they mark astronomical calendars, sacred pathways, or energetic circuits, the Carnac stones are a testament to a civilization that saw the Earth not as dirt to be farmed, but as a living canvas for a message written in stone. They carved their question into the landscape itself, and 5 millennia later, we are still walking between the lines trying to hear the answer. stone sentinels stand in silent, geometric order, a testament to human will imposed upon the earth. But what happens when the human body itself rebels, when the very elements of blood and bone refuse to obey the mind's command? In the sweltering summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg became the stage for one of history's most bizarre and terrifying epidemics. It began not with a cough or a fever, but with a single, inexplicable step. A woman named Frau Trophia stepped into the street and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration. Her movements were frantic, jerking, and utterly beyond her control. She danced for hours, then days, unable to stop even as her feet bled and her body screamed in exhaustion. Within a week, dozens had joined her. Within a month, the crowd of uncontrollable dancers had swelled to over 400 people, gyrating and leaping in the public squares and streets of the city, a vortex of desperate, ceaseless motion. This was the dancing plague, and it did not end with sore feet. Dancers collapsed from heart attacks, strokes, and sheer physical depletion. Contemporary chroniclers recorded that as many as 15 people a day were dying from the relentless compulsion. Their bodies quite literally danced to death. The city council and local physicians were baffled. In their search for a cause, they looked to the prevailing understanding of the human body, governed by the four humors or bodily fluids. The leading theory blamed an imbalance of hot blood, an excess of this vital fluid that overheated the brain and drove the limbs to constant motion. But this physiological explanation quickly intertwined with a spiritual one. Many believed the dancing was a curse, a manifestation of Saint Vitus's wrath. Saint Vitus was a Christian martyr who was also, paradoxically, invoked by those suffering from a nervous disorder called chorea, or Saint Vitus's dance. The city's leaders, desperate for a solution, decided to lean into this spiritual diagnosis. They banned all public dancing and gambling, and they organized a bizarre remedy. They built a large wooden stage in the horse market, hired musicians, and brought in professional dancers, believing that if the afflicted danced themselves to exhaustion in a controlled, sanctioned environment, the curse would break. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. The music and the spectacle only fueled the mania, drawing more people into the frenzied state and intensifying the epidemic. The stage became a theater of agony. So what was truly happening in the streets of Strasbourg? Modern science looks back at this event through a very different lens, and two primary theories dominate. The first is mass psychogenic illness, a powerful form of social contagion where extreme psychological stress manifests as physical symptoms in a group. The 1500s in Strasbourg were a time of profound suffering. The region was plagued by famine, crippling poverty, and a series of devastating crop failures. The people lived under a thick cloud of superstition and fear, with constant preaching about sin and divine punishment. In such a pressure cooker of anxiety, the sight of one person breaking down in a dramatic, physical way could have triggered a cascade of similar reactions. The dancing was a hysterical release, a collective scream of the body when the mind could no longer bear its burdens. The second, and perhaps more physically compelling, theory points to a sinister gift from the earth itself. The staple food of the poor was rye bread. Under damp conditions, rye can be infected by a fungus called ergot. This fungus produces powerful alkaloids, chemical compounds that are precursors to the drug LSD. Ergot poisoning, known historically as St. Anthony's fire, causes a horrifying array of symptoms, including violent muscle spasms, convulsions, hallucinations, and a burning sensation in the limbs. It is not a stretch to imagine that a community consuming tainted bread might experience waves of involuntary, jerking movements that could be interpreted as a crazed dance. The hot blood theory of the medieval doctors might have accidentally touched on a truth, the sensation of burning limbs reported in ergotism. This tale is a profound mystery of the body's own elements running amok. Was it a psychological firestorm, a chemical poisoning from the earth's corrupted grain, or a terrifying fusion of both? the dancers of Strasbourg were prisoners inside their own moving bodies, driven by forces they could not name, in a performance where the only possible finale was collapse. The dancers of Strasbourg were prisoners of forces within their own bodies, a storm of mind and chemistry. But there is a place in the Pacific Ocean where the storm is external, colossal, and utterly sovereign. South of Japan, a vast expanse of water holds a reputation so dark it has earned the name the Devil's Sea. To Western media, it is often called the Dragon's Triangle, a Pacific counterpart to the Atlantic's Bermuda Triangle, sharing the same eerie resume of disappearances. Since the 1940s, numerous fishing boats, research vessels, and even military aircraft have reportedly vanished in this region under mysterious circumstances, often with no distress signal and no wreckage ever found. The list includes the Kaiomaru No. 5, a Japanese research ship sent to investigate volcanic activity in the area, which disappeared with all 31 crew members in 1952. These incidents are not ancient folklore, they are modern maritime records, and they have painted this patch of ocean as a zone where the normal rules of navigation and physics seem to suspend themselves. The water and air here are not merely elements, they are characters in a legend of profound danger. But long before modern ships sailed into this mystery, the local cultures had already mapped its sacred terror onto their spiritual landscape. Japanese folklore speaks of Ryugu-jo, the magnificent underwater palace of Yujin, the dragon god of the sea. This palace was said to lie at the bottom of the ocean in this very region, a realm where time flowed differently and where humans could be lured to a glorious, eternal doom. The sea here was not empty, it was occupied, the domain of a powerful and temperamental deity. To venture into these waters was to enter his court, and the sudden, violent storms that could erupt without warning were seen as the dragon's breath, his displeasure made manifest. This ancient belief in a sacred, animate sea finds a strange echo in the modern theories that attempt to explain the disappearances. The Dragon's Triangle is one of the most geologically volatile areas on the planet. It sits at the convergence of several tectonic plates, a junction point riddled with undersea volcanoes and deep ocean trenches. This intense geological activity could be the engine behind several plausible yet terrifying natural phenomena. One leading suspect is the rogue wave, a wall of water that can appear seemingly out of nowhere, reaching heights of 100 feet or more. For centuries, sailors' tales of such monsters were dismissed as exaggeration, but science now confirms these freak waves are real, generated by the complex interaction of powerful currents like the Kuroshio, which flows through the triangle, and the chaotic seafloor topography. A single, unexpected rogue wave could easily obliterate a ship before a mayday call could be completed. Furthermore, the volcanic activity on the seafloor could produce sudden, massive bubbles of methane gas. A large enough plume erupting beneath a vessel would drastically reduce the density of the water, causing the ship to lose buoyancy instantly and sink without a trace. The same explosive degassing could create a hazard for low-flying aircraft by altering air density or even igniting in a fiery blast. Add to this the region's propensity for sudden, violent typhoons and the presence of deep underwater trenches that could swallow wreckage whole, and you have a perfect recipe for maritime mystery. The Devil's Sea, then, exists at the intersection of measurable geology and enduring myth. The Dragon's Palace may be a metaphor for the volatile, magma-lit seafloor. The dragon's breath could be the explosive venting of gases or the howling wind of a microstorm. The vanishings are not supernatural, but they occur in a theater of such extreme and concentrated elemental force that it feels supernatural. This area reminds us that the sacred fear of the ocean is not born from ignorance, but from a primal recognition of its true, awesome power. When the water churns from the Earth's fire and the air twists into a killer wind, we are not facing a mystery, we are witnessing the elements in their most raw and sovereign state. High on the slopes of a Peruvian volcano, the ice held a secret for 5 centuries. In September 1995, the anthropologist Johann Reinhard was climbing Mount Ampoto, an extinct volcano over 20,000 feet high, when he noticed a strange bundle partially exposed by a recent volcanic ash melt. As he carefully brushed away the ice, he uncovered a figure frozen in time. This was Juanita, the Ice Maiden, a young Inca girl sacrificed around the year 1450 and preserved with an almost ethereal perfection by the deep freeze of the Andean peak. She was not lost, she was given, and her discovery opened a window into one of the Inca Empire's most profound and somber mysteries, the ritual of Capacocha. To understand Juanita's presence on that lifeless summit, we must understand the Inca worldview. The mountains were not just geological features, they were Apu, powerful mountain gods who controlled the weather, water, and fertility of the land below. The Apu were capricious deities who needed to be appeased with the most valuable gift a society could offer, a perfect, unblemished human life. The Capacocha was not an act of cruelty in the modern sense, but a sacred contract, a transaction of ultimate solemnity. Chosen children, often from noble families, were selected for their physical perfection and purity. They were treated with immense reverence in the months leading up to the ceremony, feasted and honored as intermediaries between the human world and the divine. The journey to the mountaintop was a long and deliberate pilgrimage, a final ascent into the realm of the gods. At the culmination, high in the thin air where earth meets sky, the child was given a ritual drink likely to sedate them, and then, through methods still debated by archaeologists, was offered to the Apu. They were left on the peak, often in a ceremonial seated position, bundled in fine textiles and accompanied by exquisite grave goods, small gold and silver figurines, shells, and food. The intention was clear: these children did not die. They were transformed into eternal ambassadors, living forever with the gods to ensure the empire's stability. The elements here are partners in this sacred act. The mountain, the sacred earth, is the deity itself, the receiver of the offering. The ice and frigid air, the sacred preservatives, are the guardians of the pact. They freeze the moment of sacrifice, not to hide it, but to sanctify it, holding the child in a state of suspended animation, forever beautiful and forever serving their purpose. When Johann Reinhard looked upon Juanita's face, he was not seeing a victim of a primitive practice. He was witnessing the endpoint of a profound spiritual logic. Her frozen body, with its intact organs, clothing, and even the remnants of her last meal, became a time capsule of faith. Scientific analysis revealed she was well-nourished, ate a diet of elite foods like maize and llama meat in her final months, and that the blow to her head that likely ended her life was precise and ritualistic. She was a willing participant in a cosmology where individual life was woven into the survival of the whole. The Ice Maiden forces us to sit with a difficult duality. It is a story that intertwines breathtaking reverence with heartbreaking finality. The mountain god received its due, the ice faithfully kept its charge, and a young girl became part of the mountain itself, a permanent fixture in a landscape of stone and sky, where the line between sacrifice and divinity forever blurred in the cold, clear air. The frozen silence of a mountaintop sacrifice is a world away from the chaotic noise of a Tennessee farmhouse, yet both stories ask how unseen forces can command the physical world. In the early 1800s, the family of John Bell found themselves at the center of an American legend that would blur the line between a ghost story and a raw display of elemental chaos. Their ordeal began with simple, unsettling sounds, knocks on the walls and windows with no source, the gnawing of rats where no rats were, but it quickly escalated into a physical siege. Invisible hands would yank the bed covers off the children in the night. The family patriarch, John Bell, was slapped, pinched, and had his shoes pulled off by an unseen grip. The entity, which the family and their neighbors began to call the Bell Witch, seemed to command the very air and objects around it, twisting them into instruments of torment. It could speak with a raspy, whispering voice, offering prophecies and cruel commentary on family affairs, and even sing hymns in a chilling, disembodied choir. This was not a fleeting apparition. It was an interactive, intelligent, and malicious presence that focused its energy on the material world. For over a century, the bell, which has been framed as a classic poltergeist haunting, a ghost story rooted in a local feud or a cursed land. But modern parapsychology offers a different lens, one that ties such phenomena directly to the human psyche and the latent energy within the sacred elements around us. The theory suggests that poltergeist activity, with its raps, moving objects, and physical disturbances, may not be the work of discarnate spirits, but a manifestation of psychokinetic energy, or PK. This is the hypothetical ability of the human mind to influence physical matter without physical interaction. In cases like the Bell Witch, the intense emotional stress, repressed anger, or adolescent turmoil within a household member, often a young person, might unconsciously act as a catalyst. Their psychic energy, boiling over, could theoretically ripple outward, interacting with the ambient environment. The knocks on the wall are not made by a ghostly fist, but by concentrated bursts of mental energy vibrating the air molecules against the wood. The pulling of bed covers could be a subtle telekinetic tug on the fabric's atomic structure. Even the disembodied voice might be a form of direct vocalization, where the unconscious mind manipulates air currents in the vocal tract of an entranced individual or shapes sound waves directly in the atmosphere. This interpretation transforms the haunting from an external invasion to an internal eruption. The farmhouse itself, built from wood and stone, and the air within it become the medium, the sacred elements of earth and air turned into a canvas for a troubled psyche. The phenomena are not random. They are a physical language, a desperate and distorted cry for attention, or an expression of unresolved conflict within the family unit. The Bell, which famously claimed to have killed John Bell by poisoning his medicine, and after his death it promised to return in 7 years, a narrative that feels deeply personal and vengeful. Whether one believes in psychokinesis or not, the story forces a compelling question. When a place seems to turn violently alive, are we witnessing a supernatural entity, or are we seeing the hidden power of human emotion momentarily mastering the physical world, using air as a voice and matter as a weapon? The Bell Witch tale suggests that the most frightening poltergeist might not live in the walls, but within us, and the elements are merely its chosen tools for making the inner turmoil terrifyingly real. The Bell Witch's unseen force manipulated the air within a single home, but there is a place on Earth where the water itself seems to conspire against all who sail into it, a sea within a sea where legends are born from stillness. In the heart of the North Atlantic Ocean lies a region so distinct it has its own name, the Sargasso Sea. It is not bounded by land, but by a slow, mighty vortex of ocean currents, the Gulf Stream to the west, the North Atlantic Current to the north, the Canary Current to the east, and the North Equatorial Current to the south. These great rivers in the ocean spin in a clockwise gyre, encircling a vast 2 million square mile expanse of remarkably calm, deep blue water. And floating upon this serene surface is a unique ecosystem, a golden-brown raft of free-floating seaweed called sargassum. This seaweed does not wash in from shores. It is born here, living and dying in the open ocean, creating dense, shifting mats that can stretch for miles. To the first European explorers, led by Christopher Columbus in 1492, this sight was both wondrous and deeply unnerving. His ships, the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, sailed into this strange, weed-choked water. Columbus wrote in his log of the calm winds and the thick vegetation, worrying that his vessels might become entangled and trapped forever. He feared running aground on hidden shoals, though the sea here is profoundly deep. That initial encounter planted a seed, a story of a tranquil ocean that could quietly ensnare the unwary. Over the following centuries, that seed grew into a forest of terrifying lore. The Sargasso Sea became the sea of lost ships. Whalers' tales and sailors' yarns spoke of vessels from Spanish galleons to Yankee clippers that sailed into that windless haze and never sailed out. The stories described ships caught fast in the gummy embrace of the seaweed, their hulls and rudders fouled, their sails hanging limp in the breathless air. The crews, the legends said, would slowly succumb to thirst and madness under the relentless sun, their skeletons left to bleach on decks overgrown with strange marine vines. The sea was not violent, it was patient, a lethargic giant that simply refused to let go. It became a graveyard not governed by storms, but by a mysterious, stagnant aspect of the water element. This was water that did not move, that held things in a gentle, deadly grip. The very calmness was the horror, a beautiful blue trap. The myth was so potent that it bled into popular fiction. Writers like Jules Verne and William Hope Hodgson used the Sargasso as a setting for supernatural tales, a floating necropolis of dead ships haunted by spectral crews or monstrous creatures lurking in the weed. The sea transformed in the human imagination from a biological curiosity into a sentient, malevolent force, a place where the normal rules of the ocean were suspended. The scientific reality, of course, is far less sinister, but in its own way just as fascinating. The Sargasso Sea is not a ship trap. The Sargassum weed, while dense, is not strong enough to hold a vessel against its will. The famous calms, while real, are not permanent. Breezes do blow, and modern ships with engines pass through without issue. The legend of lost ships likely stems from a tragic convergence of natural factors. Before the age of steam, a sailing ship caught in the Horse latitudes, the belt of high pressure around the Sargasso, could indeed be becalmed for weeks. With no wind to push them, crews could exhaust their fresh water and supplies. The sight of derelict ships, abandoned or whose crews had perished, slowly drifting in the circular currents, would have been a chilling and common enough occurrence to fuel the stories. Those ghost ships weren't held by seaweed, they were prisoners of the current itself, the very water that defined the sea, keeping them in a slow, endless orbit. This reveals the true nature of the mystery. The Sargasso Sea is a lesson in perception. Our ancestors saw the stillness, the weed, the derelicts, and they told a story of a hungry sea. Science sees a unique, gentle gyre, a vital nursery for eels and turtles, a floating oasis in the open ocean. Both views are rooted in observation, but one is clothed in the language of elemental dread. The Sargasso asks us why we fear stillness more than storm, and why a sea that simply holds things close feels, in our bones, more terrifying than one that tries to dash them apart. That still, seaweed-choked sea speaks of a quiet, patient power, a force that holds rather than shatters. But what if ancient hands discovered a way to make the earth itself hold a different kind of power, not of stillness, but of a subtle, crackling energy? In the dusty archives of the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad, before the chaos of war, there sat a small, unassuming clay pot roughly the size of a man's fist. It was dated to the Parthian period, sometime between 250 BC and 224 AD. Inside this simple earthen jar, archaeologists found something that did not fit the usual catalogue of ancient treasures. It contained a rolled copper sheet forming a cylinder, and within that cylinder was an iron rod. The jar's opening was sealed with asphalt or bitumen, a natural tar, which also held the iron rod perfectly in place, insulating it from the copper cylinder. To the untrained eye, it was just a curious assembly of mundane materials: clay, copper, iron, and tar. But to a modern engineer, the arrangement is shockingly familiar. It bears a striking, almost uncanny resemblance to the basic components of a galvanic cell, a simple battery. The theory proposed by researchers like Wilhelm Koenig in the 1930s is this. If the jar was filled with an acidic or alkaline liquid, like vinegar or grape juice, the electrolyte would have allowed a chemical reaction to occur between the dissimilar metals. The iron rod would act as an anode, the copper cylinder as a cathode, and a small electrical current, perhaps around 1 volt, would flow between them. This is not science fiction, it is basic electrochemistry, and the so-called Baghdad battery seems purpose-built to exploit it. The immediate question is, of course, what on earth would they have used it for? The voltage is far too low to power any kind of device as we understand it. One of the most persistent and poetic speculations involves the sacred element of fire, or more precisely, the illusion of it. In this era, skilled artisans were masters of electroplating, using thin layers of gold or silver to gild less precious metals and statues. The traditional method requires a source of electricity to bind the precious metal to the base object. Could a bank of these clay pot cells, wired in series, have provided just enough gentle current to facilitate such delicate work? A gilded artifact shimmering with a seemingly divine light would have held immense religious and ceremonial power, a literal glow bestowed by a hidden force. Other theories are more medicinal, drawing on ancient Greek and Roman texts that describe using electric fish like the torpedo ray to numb pain. Perhaps these jars, producing a similar tingling shock, were employed in early forms of electrotherapy, a sacred healing practice where the mysterious spirit of the metals was transferred to the body to cure ailments. Or the purpose could have been purely mystical. Imagine a priest in a darkened temple connecting the terminals to a small statue. A faint tingle, a subtle vibration, or even a barely perceptible glow in the right material could be presented as a miracle, as the touch of a god brought forth by the sacred elements of earth and metal. The clay formed from the ground becomes a vessel. The copper and iron ores pulled from the deep earth become the active agents. Even the asphalt seal is a product of the earth. This entire device is a conversation between different aspects of the sacred element of earth, orchestrated to produce something intangible and wondrous, a whisper of controlled lightning. Skeptics rightly point out that no wires have ever been found with these jars, and that they could just as easily be storage containers for sacred scrolls, with the iron rod merely a rusted core for the rolled parchment. The asphalt seal would then be for preservation, not insulation. The truth is, we may never know for certain, but the enduring power of the Baghdad battery lies not in proving ancient electricity, but in the profound question it forces us to ask. How many times have we looked at an artifact from the past and categorized it by what we know, rather than by what its maker might have known? This humble clay pot challenges our timeline of discovery. It suggests that the spark of ingenuity, the desire to harness invisible forces from the materials of the world, is a flame that may have flickered in distant ages, in forms we are only now beginning to recognize. Far from the ocean's quiet gyre, the skin of the Namibian desert tells a different kind of story, written in perfect, enigmatic dots. Stretching across the arid grasslands, millions of near-perfect circles of bare earth pattern the landscape, each one a ring of tall grass surrounding a sterile, sandy center. These are the fairy circles, and from the ground they look like the work of a meticulous, giant artist. From the air, they form a vast, polka-dotted tapestry that seems to pulse with a strange, silent rhythm. For the indigenous Himba people who have lived with these formations for centuries, the explanation is woven into the sacred fabric of the land. Their oral traditions speak of the footprints of the gods, places where divine beings touched the earth and left behind a permanent mark of their passage. Other legends tell of a great underground dragon, whose fiery breath as it moves beneath the surface burns the vegetation from below, creating these perfect circular scars. These are not random holes, they are signatures, evidence that the earth here is alive with powerful, invisible forces. The circles are sacred spaces, to be respected as part of a living cosmology where the element of earth communicates through geometry. Modern science, however, arrived with a different set of questions and a fierce debate that has raged for decades. The first major theory points to the industrious, hidden world of termites. Proponents suggest that a specific species of sand termite nests beneath each circle, systematically consuming the roots of the grasses in the center to create a barren zone. This cleared patch then acts as a water trap, allowing precious rainfall to percolate deep into the soil and be stored, rather than being sucked up by plants. The termites then feed on the roots of the lush surrounding ring of grass, creating a sustainable, symbiotic reservoir in the desert. The circle is an engineered survival strategy, a testament to insect ingenuity. The competing theory is one of pure plant self-organization, a dramatic idea stripped of any animal architect. In this model, the harsh desert environment itself is the designer. The grasses are locked in a brutal competition for water and nutrients. As they grow, the stronger plants suck resources from the soil around their roots, creating a zone of depletion. Weaker grasses in that zone die off, creating a bare patch. This patch then benefits the surrounding plants by channeling rainwater outward to their root systems, reinforcing the ring. The circles become a natural, emergent pattern, a mathematical equilibrium born from scarcity, where the plants collectively organize to maximize survival in a punishing landscape. It is the desert writing its own rules of order through vegetation. Recent research has added fascinating layers, suggesting that both theories might be pieces of a larger puzzle. That termite activity could initiate the circles, which are then maintained and regulated by the plant competition dynamics. This mystery, etched so clearly on the Earth's surface, challenges our need for a single, tidy answer. It presents a choice between a narrative of deliberate creation, whether by gods, dragons, or insects, and a narrative of spontaneous, emergent order arising from the raw struggle for life. The fairy circles are a Rorschach test on the desert floor. Do you see the footprint of a deity, the tunnel of a dragon, the colony of a termite, or the silent, desperate mathematics of surviving plants? Perhaps the truth is that the sacred element of Earth is capable of all these stories at once, a canvas where myth and mechanism are not contradictions, but different languages describing the same profound, circular beauty. The desert's cryptic circles speak of patterns born from struggle, but in the quiet fields of medieval England, a different kind of pattern was broken by visitors who seemed to emerge from the earth itself. In the 12th century, during the reign of King Stephen, villagers harvesting their crops near the Suffolk village of Woolpit made a discovery that would be recorded in two separate chronicles for posterity. They found two children, a boy and a girl, cowering at the mouth of a wolf pit, an earthen trap dug for predators. Their clothing was strange, of an unfamiliar material and cut. But it was their skin that caused true astonishment, for it was tinged a profound, undeniable green. They spoke no English, only a language no one could recognize, and they refused all food offered to them, growing weak with hunger. Eventually, they were presented with raw broad beans, still in their green pods. This they accepted eagerly, eating only the beans for a long time until they gradually acquired a taste for bread and other foods. As their diet changed, the green hue slowly faded from their skin. The boy, who was younger and frailer, soon sickened and died. The girl, however, survived, learned English, and was baptized. When she was finally able to tell her story, she described a place of perpetual twilight, where all the people were green, and where the only light was like the glow of a late evening. She and her brother had been following their father's cattle through an underground cavern when they heard a loud sound like bells. Driven by curiosity, they wandered into the noise and emerged, dazzled and confused, into the blinding brightness of the Suffolk sun, into our world. This account, recorded by the chroniclers William of Newburgh and Ralph of Coggeshall, is not presented as a fable, but as a factual event witnessed by many. It presents a mystery deeply rooted in the sacred element of Earth, not as a provider or a protector, but as a veil, a boundary between worlds. The children did not arrive by ship or by road, they came from a cave, from the ground itself. This detail transforms the Earth from mere soil into a possible membrane, hiding entire civilizations in its depths. The green tint of their skin invites a cascade of theories. The most modern and speculative casts them as accidental visitors from another world, their coloration a result of a different biochemistry, or perhaps the consumption of copper-rich plants on their home planet. Their sensitivity to our sun and their initial diet point to a biology adapted to a dimmer, perhaps subterranean, environment. In this reading, the cave was not a tunnel but a portal, and the loud bells they heard could be interpreted as the hum of a malfunctioning dimensional gateway or spacecraft. A more historical, earthbound analysis sees them as refugees. Some scholars suggest they might have been Flemish children, perhaps orphans from a nearby community of weavers who faced persecution. Their strange language could have been Flemish, unintelligible to the Saxon villagers. Their green skin might have been a symptom of chloroses, a form of anemia often called the green sickness, caused by malnutrition and a diet severely deficient in iron, which could have been exacerbated by living in dark, confined spaces. The beans, rich in iron, would have begun to cure them, explaining the fading of the green hue. The land of twilight could then be a child's memory of the deep, shaded forests of Flanders or the smoky, sunless confines of a mine or underground workshop where they were forced to labor. Yet another theory weaves folklore into the landscape. The British Isles are rich with tales of the fairy folk, who often dwell in hollow hills and barrows in a parallel world that intersects with our own at certain liminal places. These fairies are frequently described as having a peculiar complexion, sometimes green, and their realm is one of perpetual dusk. The loud bells the children heard could have been fairy bells, the enchanting music that lures humans into their domain. In this interpretation, the green children were not extraterrestrials or refugees, but humans who had strayed into the fairy realm, perhaps as infants, and were now returning, changed by their time in that other world. The girls' eventual assimilation and baptism represent a classic folk motif, the reclaiming of a soul from the clutches of the unseen world. This tale, nestled in the sober pages of medieval chronicles, refuses to be pinned down. It is a story about the otherness that can literally bubble up from the ground beneath our feet. It asks us what lies just beyond the edge of the known map, not across the sea, but directly below the plow. The Earth in the Woolpit mystery is not a grave, but a cradle for possibilities, a hiding place for entire realms of green twilight and beings who walk a different sun. It suggests that sometimes the most alien world is not in the stars, but in the soil, waiting for a wolf pit to collapse and reveal a crack in reality itself. The green children emerged from the Earth with a story of another world, but sometimes the most terrifying tales are not about what comes out of the ground, but what the sea refuses to give back. Our final mystery takes us to the very edge of the known, to a lonely rock where human presence was a flickering candle against an infinite, roaring dark. In December 1900, the lighthouse on Eilean Moor, the largest of the Flannan Isles off the coast of Scotland, went dark. When the relief ship Hesperus finally reached the island on December 26th, after days of storm delays, the crew found a scene of profound and orderly silence. The lighthouse door was unlocked. Inside, the clock had stopped. 2 of the 3 oilskins were missing, while 1 still hung on its peg. The kitchen table held a half-eaten meal and an overturned chair. Up in the lantern room, the lamps were meticulously cleaned and refilled, ready to be lit. But the 3 keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Jucat, and Donald MacArthur, were gone. Vanished, the only record left was the station's logbook, and its final entries wove a narrative of growing dread. Assistant Keeper Marshall wrote of days of hurricane-force winds, one so severe that he, a seasoned mariner, had never seen their like. He described the 3 men praying together as the storm screamed against the glass. The final, chilling line, written on December 15th, reads simply, "Storm ended, sea calm." God is over all, After that, only silence. The official investigation concluded that the men had been swept away by a freak, colossal wave while attending to equipment on the western landing platform, a theory supported by evidence of damage there. It was a rational, tragic end, a testament to the ocean's raw, unpredictable power. Yet the complete absence of bodies, the untouched state of the lighthouse, and that eerie, stopped clock have never fully laid the mystery to rest. The logbook's entries themselves are part of the puzzle, as later meteorological reviews found no record of storms severe enough to match Marshall's descriptions on the dates he gave. This discrepancy opens a door to a more unsettling interpretation. Could the terror described in the log have been internal, a psychological storm born from absolute isolation? The Flannan Isles are a place of profound loneliness, battered by wind and haunted by ancient legends of spirits and little people. The relentless sensory assault of wind and waves, the crushing weight of responsibility in that stone tower could have fractured even experienced minds. Some have wondered if the log entries were a cry of mental distress, a documentation of a shared delusion or a desperate fear that something beyond the storm was watching them. The untouched meal and the single remaining oilskin suggest a sudden, urgent departure, but not necessarily a coordinated one. The most haunting theories listen to the elements themselves. The sea and wind here are not mere weather, they are ancient, sentient forces in Celtic lore. The isolation of the rock acts as an amplifier, not just for sound, but for something older. Could the keepers have been lured, one, by a strange sound or a flickering light on the water, only to be consumed by the hungry dark? Their disappearance feels less like an accident and more like a claiming. The lighthouse stood as a symbol of human defiance against the chaotic elements, a tiny point of order and light. Its sudden silencing, with its interior left in perfect working condition, feels like a message. The sea did not destroy the tower, it simply took the men, leaving their orderly world intact as a mockery of their presumption. The mystery of Eilean Moor is the ultimate conflict between the rational map and the terrifying territory. We can chart the waves and calculate the wind, but we cannot measure the weight of solitude on the human spirit or quantify the moment when a natural force begins to feel like a personal, malevolent will. The three keepers vanished into the dialogue between water and air, and all that remains is their stopped clock and their final, ambiguous prayer. In the end, the lighthouse still stands, its beam cutting through the same mist. It no longer warns of rocks, but of the abyss that lies just beyond the edge of our understanding, where the sacred elements are not just surroundings, but active, hungry participants in every story we dare to tell. From divine chariots in the sky to silent stones that sail across desert flats, these 30 mysteries have taken us across continents and centuries. We have stood before eternal flames sheltered by waterfalls and listened to the deep, resonant song of shifting sands. We have traced the paths of cursed gems and followed the desperate, dancing steps of those caught in an invisible storm. Each story, whether born from fire, water, earth, or air, is a testament to the same profound human impulse. When our ancestors looked at the world, they did not see inert matter. They saw intention, they saw conversation. A flickering flame was not just combustion, it was a divine messenger or a guardian's breath. A groaning mountain was not just tectonic stress, it was an imprisoned god. A still, deep lake was not just water, but a sleeping serpent's domain. These tales are the language we invented to speak back to a world that felt alive, to find meaning in the chaos, and to locate the sacred in the very fabric of existence. They are not failures of science, but triumphs of imagination, the original framework through which we sought to understand the forces that shaped our lives and our survival. Today, we have new languages, new maps of understanding. We can explain the chemistry of a red waterfall or the physics of a singing dune, yet the awe remains. The mystery simply moves, settling into the beautiful complexity of the natural explanations themselves. The sacred elements have not lost their power, they have revealed deeper, more intricate layers of their truth. So now the question turns to you. What forgotten legend lingers in your own landscape? Which of these 30 mysteries lingers in your mind? And what does it tell you about our endless need to find the extraordinary woven into the ordinary world? Share your thoughts and your local tales below. The conversation with the elements never truly ends, it simply changes form, waiting for the next curious mind to listen. For thousands of years, a single, unifying thread connects every tale of sacred fire, whispering stone, and living water. It is the thread of alchemy. This was not merely the primitive chemistry of turning lead into gold, as popular history often simplifies it. It was a grand, spiritual philosophy, a sacred science that sought nothing less than the complete understanding and mastery of the four elements. The alchemists saw in fire, water, earth, and air not just substances, but the fundamental alphabet of creation. By learning their language, by discovering their hidden sympathies and antipathies, the alchemists believed they could unlock the secrets of the universe itself, and in doing so, perfect both matter and the human soul. The philosopher's stone, the elixir of life, these were not just goals. They were symbols of a world where the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual dissolved. Our journey through these 30 mysteries has, in a profound way, been a tour of the alchemist's laboratory, a world-sized workshop where every strange event is an experiment left running by time. The perpetual lamps sought by medieval explorers were attempts to capture the eternal spirit of fire, to make a light that mirrored the divine. The quest for the fountain of youth was the ultimate alchemical distillation, seeking the quintessence, the pure fifth element, within water that could purify the body of decay. The walking statues of Easter Island and the restless coffins of Barbados are stories of Earth animated by an unseen force, whether called mana or spiritual unrest, echoing the alchemical belief that matter itself possesses a hidden life and consciousness. Even the ghost lights and the modest noises are the elements speaking in a code we have only partially deciphered, the spontaneous language of a world the alchemists believed was endlessly communicative. These historical enigmas are the unfinished equations of that ancient science. They are the phenomena that resisted easy categorization, the results that did not fit the expected formula, and thus they were set aside in the ledger of history as legends or curses. But what they represent is the persistent human drive to complete the alchemical work. We no longer seek to turn lead into gold in a crucible, but we are engaged in a modern transmutation of understanding. We use mass spectrometers instead of mortars and pestles, satellites instead of star charts, but the quest is identical. We are still trying to hear the earth song in the seismic groans of a Connecticut valley. We are still trying to capture the breath of the divine in the thin air of a Delphic fissure. We are still trying to distill the secret of life from the ancient, iron-rich blood of an Antarctic glacier. Every mystery we have explored is a piece of the magnum opus, the great work, left incomplete. They remind us that the world is still whispering its formulas. The sacred elements have not surrendered all their secrets. They still hold the power to astonish, to terrify, and to humble us. The fire that does not burn, the water that grants no mercy, the earth that moves on its own, the air that carries a curse, these are not failures of our understanding. They are its frontier. They are the proof that the universe remains a place of profound magic, whether we choose to define that magic as the hand of God or the breathtaking, intricate machinery of nature we have yet to fully map. So the next time you feel the wind on your face, watch a flame dance, or cup water in your hands, remember you are holding a fragment of the oldest and greatest mystery of all. The alchemist's dream is not dead. It simply wears a new face, and it invites each of us to keep listening, to keep questioning, and to keep wondering at the elemental magic that built the world.